Don Bartlett and James Steele are the authors of this new book, The Betrayal of the American Dream. And gentlemen, you are a team of investigative reporters that's as honored as any. Bob Woodward, my former colleague at the Post, speaks highly of you. Your peers have celebrated you. You've won 2 Pulitzers, National Magazine Awards. The Pulitzers were for auditing the IRS in 75 and 89, going after the House Ways and Means Committee in terms of tax loopholes being given to big business. You've won 6 George Polk Awards. You are in a line of a great tradition of American, well, what people would in the old days call muckrakers. Today we call them investigative reporters. But investigative reporting as a craft seems to be in decline. Doesn't seem to be much of it anymore. Now, we went through a fallow period, and you go back to the early part of the 20th century. There's, people like Lincoln Steffens and Ida Tarbell and Upton Sinclair, I guess, are the most famous names. Then you come forward to the 60s, and now you see more of that kind of critical, intellectual consciousness emerge in the American press. There's a market for stories that dig in, and you get people like Halberstam. Who would you mention from that period?
Neil Sheehan, certainly of the UPI at that time, Bob Greene of Newsday, and all the great investigative reporting teams he put together, both for regional, national, and even international pieces. Greene was a real trendsetter at the time toward looking at the big issues facing us, not just the small ones. And so Greene set the pace for really an awful lot of our business at that time.
So it was not a widespread occupation, let's put it that way. The New York Times basically did very little. You had a My Lai massacre.
I was thinking when you said that.
That would have been a logical place for it. Didn't go there. Went to a little news service and little papers around the country.
But didn't Neil Sheehan do My Lai?
No, that was
Seymour Hersh.
Seymour Hersh. But he was at the Times, wasn't he? No. Oh.
Later he was.
Later
he was.
Times was very late in coming to investigative reporting. Most people tend not to think about that.
And why is it that we have so little investigative reporting today? Is it because of the economic problems that are besetting the nation's newspapers?
A lot of it is our economics, because news staffs everywhere have been dramatically reduced. It's also, as Don was suggesting, you don't always find many newspaper editors in any era embracing investigative reporting. The point we've seen over the years, it's not just economics, it's the discomfort that investigative reporting often causes in a newsroom. Because it's troublesome. It's that more than the economics. I mean, if you're going to ruffle the feathers of somebody powerful, that gets those people running in to complain to the publisher, and their stories are legion over the years about those kinds of things happening. Well, Don and I were very fortunate all through the 70s and through really almost all our career to work for people who were really strong and upright in that area, and just let the chips fall where they may, where the work led you.
Well, you were very fortunate, and I think you've done a lot. Obviously, you've been greatly honored by your peers in the craft of journalism. And in this book, you're back to attacking the rich. And I want to say that the heart and soul of this book is your premise that tens of millions of middle-class Americans and working poor people have lost out, and that for them, the American dream is over right now, today. And you argue that the reason for this is that there's too much power and influence in the hands of the very rich in American society. And when I'm looking at this, I'm thinking to myself, people are going to say, well, these guys are basically anti-Romney, class warfare advocates for the Democrats, that you are beating up on the rich, when in fact, they would argue, the rich are people who create. And you think back to what Bill Clinton and Cory Booker and Senator Schumer said after there was criticism of the folks on Wall Street. They said, these are good folks, they make contributions, they've done so much in our communities. Don, are you in fact a class warrior?
This class warfare thing, I'm not sure where this comes from. This country was founded on class warfare. That's why it was, people came here. They didn't want the British system. What we have is the British system now.
Why do you say that?
A few people at the top controlling things. A financial aristocracy.
Well, you call it a plutocracy in this book.
We didn't call it that.
We actually were just quoting from a memo that a Wall Street investment banker used to describe what the United States has become. He used the word plutonomy. He said the U.S. is now a plutonomy.
Combination of plutocracy and economy.
Exactly.
And he wanted his own word.
And plutonomy is a less, let's say, excitable word than plutocracy. But his point was, there are a few plutonomies around the world, and it's characterized by a tremendous concentration of wealth at the top, and a wealth that is greater than all but, let's say, the bottom 90%. And that's what he used. And he said, that's who's going to buy products. That's who's going to drive the economy. The middle class is just not as important as it once was.
Well, I think you say in the book that for people who make less than $200,000, they don't count.
They're irrelevant. And this is in the eyes of the hedge fund people. These are hedge fund people talking. And you can understand where they're coming from. The middle class in China dwarfs the middle class here. Middle class in India, Brazil, you name it. And it's why they say the U.S. is kind of irrelevant in that sense.
They're always looking for growth. I mean, that's the heart of the whole financial aristocracy and movement. They want growth. They want growth in stocks. They want the companies that have the multinational connections and operations and revenue streams. That's where they want growth. And that's why they see the middle class of China and India in particular as representing that growth. That's the whole heart of things. Where in the U.S. is more stable now, and the folks at the bottom don't have the money to buy like they once did.
But when President Obama says something of this type publicly, he is castigated, and he is said to be attacking people who create wealth in America. And it's said, when he said, you didn't build it, that the larger society contributed the legal structure, the bridges, the roads, he is said to be demeaning small business owners in America. Do you agree or disagree?
No, absolutely not. I mean, he's absolutely right. Maybe it could have been phrased more elegantly, perhaps, but he's absolutely right. It would be like Jim and I saying, well, we did all of this ourselves. We didn't do it all ourselves. We had all kinds of help. And the idea that one person or two people do everything. The best example is Steve Jobs and Apple. Apple derived enormous benefits from the Advanced Research Project Agency that really started the internet. It wasn't Al Gore, it really was ARPA. But does he ever pay tribute to that? Absolutely not. There's also this perception that one or two people did everything. And this, the president was absolutely right. I don't think he phrased it right, but everybody has a lot of help.
We've got a statistic in the book that to us goes to the heart of your question. In the mid-50s, the very richest Americans, and that has been a group that has been tracked by IRS for decades. It's the 400 richest. In the mid-50s, they paid 51% of their income in federal taxes. By 2007, on the eve of the meltdown, they're paying 16%. I mean, this didn't just happen overnight. This wasn't a hurricane that just blew through and lowered everybody's tax rates. This was public policy, driven systematically over many years. And it's contributed to the inequity, it's contributed to the imbalance, and it's also why so many people at the bottom don't have the money they once did.
Well, you write in the book that 2/3 of the nation's total income between 2002 and 2007 went to the top 1%. And, this is an incredible reality. But then you ask the question, and I think rhetorically, people wonder, where'd the jobs go? How is this possible? Why is there so much money going to the very rich? And the answer comes back to, in your mind, these hedge funds, these very rich folks who have been enriching themselves. Mm-hmm. But you say failing the American middle class and failing the American worker. Now, what's interesting to me is you go after people who most would not view as conservatives, people like Tom Friedman in the New York Times, who says, you know what, global trade is a good thing. You say global trade is not a good thing. Okay, why?